All right, you're going to see that chapter 8 and chapter 7 are very, very close in the sense of they hone in on these concepts that you will see most specifically advertisers doing. And we're going to talk about that as we move forward. Keep in mind, oftentimes students use terms in this class incorrectly. Either they're Googling it or however they're finding the answer. Obviously, reasons is one of them, conclusion is a few. Like, there's just a few, but the one specifically I see oftentimes used incorrectly is suggestion. Okay, and how we're using it in class is going to be a lot different than how you might have used it before. Okay, so suggestion as we use it in class is the presentation of ideas or images. So ideas or images are being suggested to you in such a way to reveal certain ideas, qualities, and conceal others. Okay, so a really good example is that when you go to Vegas and you walk into like Caesar's Palace or whatever, when you walk in the casino, you look around and you feel like you're outside. It's suggesting that it's a big, beautiful day outside. The sky, the ceiling's very blue, the lighting is very bright, like it's very suggestive. It's giving you this, oh wow, I'm kind of outside even though I'm inside. And the point behind that is to keep you assuming that it's daytime, to keep you awake, because all of a sudden you leave it, you leave the casino and you're like, how the hell? Well, I thought it was light out. But it's the suggestion of the atmosphere in Vegas in that particular casino. And all casinos, really, they do that. Let me give you more examples of how suggestion is used in like either advertising or in retail stores or certain restaurants. One of which is Christmas music during the holidays, but before the holidays, if that makes sense. So sometimes they're pushing it even sooner. I believe October at one point, I walked into Lowe's and they had Christmas going on as they had Halloween going on the other side. You're walking around going, oh my God, I feel like this doesn't make any sense to me. What they're doing is while they're playing Christmas music, even though it's October, the idea is to suggest this feeling of nostalgia and, oh, I need to get gifts. And that's what the idea is behind that. They're giving suggestions through, images, you have the Christmas, but also sounds. Recall we also talked about this in one of the other chapters. I can't remember. I think it was like 3, forgive me, I can't remember, where it's the same thing where like you're watching a movie and you hear these birds chirping. Well, the idea is to suggest they're outside, right? They're walking, it looks like they're outside. They might be in a studio, but it's suggesting with the sounds of birds. Okay, again, songbirds playing in the background of a film while people are walking outside is a thing of suggestion. I'm reading my notes here. And then, say you're going into a house that's, they're trying to sell it and you walk in and they set it up like as if somebody was living there. Staging is a suggestion. Staging creates the illusion of what it would be like to live there. They do the same with cooking brownies or cookies. They have something there to make it feel like home. So when you walk in, it gives you the suggestion of, oh, you're home. All right. They do that too when they get the baby room all set up. Like, oh, this could be a baby room. All right. It's the suggestive ways that they get you to think about it. They're not, how do I say that? It's the way in which the things are set up. It's the smells, it's the sounds. It's not the actual words. Like, these people are not suggesting and saying things to you. That's the problem with how people are using this word suggestion. That's not how I want you to use suggestion. It's not someone saying something. It's the action. It's the images. It's the sounds. It's the things that make you think something without somebody saying it. That's the suggestion that I'm looking for. Okay, like when you drive by like a hamburger restaurant, what they'll do is they throw the smell out there, so you smell it and it's the suggestion of lunch, of eating. They're not telling you, but they're using sense, right? Suggestion is using, again, images, sounds, things without saying things, if that makes sense. So advertisers, movie makers, photographers, writers, they know how to choose images that give you either a positive or a negative connotation, right? That feeling of a situation. All right, so can you think of some examples of this? So think of things where you've realized that someone was doing something by suggestive behavior, or again, sounds, images, feelings. Okay, very much when you go to watch a horror movie, and you can feel you feel tense. You're like, I feel so stressed out. Well, if you took the sound out, if you took the music out, you might not have the same feeling. The music is intended to suggest that tension is coming. All right, that's what we're trying to look for here. Also, suggestion, you can also relate it to sports attire, right? A lot of times, like if you're wearing like sports gears and gym clothes, you're giving the suggestion that you work out, right? If you're like me and you're wearing them, but you haven't been to the gym in a long time, right? You're like, it's kind of, but I'm giving the suggestion, I go to the gym. I wear my tennis shoes, okay? I have tattoos, I have piercings, right? I'm giving a suggestion of who I am as a person based on these. I'm not telling you, I'm showing you. That's what suggestion is, okay? Just think of different ways in which people do this suggestive behaviors versus saying what suggestions are. Again, when you think about casinos, a lot of times too, my favorite is when I worked in retail, end caps at the ends of aisles. It's suggestive buying, right? They set it there, they put up a sign, they make it look like, ooh, you should purchase this, okay? That's the idea. Suggestion can also be done by, let me see here. I'm going to use the book for this one because I'm trying to think of, a better version of my own example of how newscasters do this, because we see it very often. Sensationalism is another one of our words, which we're going to do next. Let's go to 326. I just have to show you this because I feel like the book does a really good job of, because we're in chapter 8. Sorry, give me a second. 326. Okay, televised suggestion, right? So when we think of news, all right, let's be honest, it's all manipulative. It's all used for ratings. It's very rare you're going to get a news station that's not going to have some sort of suggestion. And the suggestion is usually based on the topics that are covered, the dialogue that is used, even though it's not, how do I say this? It's not necessarily what they say. It's kind of like manipulative in how they say it, right? Topics, what kind of topics are being covered? Maybe the time that the news is being put on, whether it's like right after dinner or really late at night, like who are they trying to kind of suggest to? How long? That's a big thing. News is on all the time. And they just talk about the same thing over and over to the point where it's like, y'all need to get a better job because do something different. It's too much news. It's too much. Like it's too much. That's all I have to say. Sorry. Didn't mean to be opinionated on that. So again, televised suggestion is what is included or excluded on a set. Think about maybe the certain ties, especially during political seasons. Tie colors, right? Reds for Republican, blues for Democrat. Who's wearing what color ties? What's in the background? Is it the flag? Is it, a cityscape? Like what's the thing behind it trying to give you a suggestion of either the set or the feel? Is it Americana they're going for? Is it for, more of the urban person, urban lifestyle? I don't know. I don't know what the goal is. You would have to watch the news and feel it out. It will tell you. When I talk about nonverbal comments like the colors of the ties, when we say use of language, it's not the exact thing that they're saying. It's the, again, ambiguity. Maybe it's the fallacious arguments. Maybe it's these certain ways in which they are talking about certain subjects, whether they use a negative connotation for something versus a positive connotation. Take a look at my slides, because my slides, you can't see the slides right here. But if you go into the lecture, it's going to be there. And you can also look at the PowerPoint, and that's going to give you those slides. That's really going to show you a better visual of what we're looking for. Because suggestion also includes framing, right? And how you frame it. Like, I'll give you examples, but one of them is like, the he's like in the wind and he's getting his hair all blown back. And then there's dudes behind him walking in t-shirts and shorts looking at him like, what is this guy doing? Right? That's suggesting that the weather is a lot worse than it really is, right? Trying to give a feel for what it is they're trying to do. Anyway, this is just something to consider as you're watching news and how they use suggestion, okay? All right, suggestion with colors. I will have a link for Instagram there on how different movies and films, like if you're going to this, this Instagram link, you're going to see that when they use certain colors, it gives certain feelings. Red feels violent, or, I think violence is the best usually. Sometimes sexual, sometimes just like, anguish. Oranges are going to give you more of like apocalyptic oftentimes. Yellow is, it's kind of me, it depends, it's your connotation. How do you feel about yellow? Sometimes it's bright and sunny, sometimes it's, you know, a little bit eerie. Let's see what else. Green usually can create, it's like spacey or creepy. Like, I don't know. Go to that Instagram link and it's going to give you a really good view, and you can really go, oh wow, that's what it's doing. How do you feel when you look at these colors? What do you feel these colors represent? Each one of them all have a different suggestion, okay? And that's the intent, all right? Sensationalism. All right, we already know what sensational is. It's where we're emphasizing stories that are more exciting than others because they feel it might not be as newsworthy. Well, there's some things that are incredibly newsworthy that we as people should probably really be paying attention to, especially things going on in Congress or Senate or Supreme Court. They're pushing a little bit more on that, but there's still sensationalism, right? They're still only covering the things that they feel they're going to get a physical, emotional response from viewers who are going to want to click the button and watch the thing over and over again and then comment underneath and interact because they get paid. It's all about the money. Let's be truthful, okay? All sides, any side, it's all about the money. You know, let's be honest, it's how our society is. So we're just going to recognize it, be okay with it, okay? Sensationalism could be something like, so like if we're going to talk about Trump, what are the things that we're talking about? We're talking about his court stuff or his political thing. You know, we're talking about these very sensationalism sort of things. But there was a time, like when he was a president, he was, you know, who's the new watchdog that he put in charge of overseeing how the administration spends trillions of dollars? Do you know? I don't know. Like, I should know this. Like, shouldn't we know these things? But the news isn't covering it. There are some things like the New York Times did have articles that were covering this, but who's looking at it? It gets pushed to the bottom. Why? Because we don't want to watch it. We want something that's going to, you know, create some kind of like, ooh, I just love reading that, even though it makes me angry. Because we're human beings and that's what we do. And we don't want to read the boring stuff, even though the boring stuff is the most important stuff, right? So think about also sensationalism when you go to the front page or any of the commercials. I mean, CNN, I watch TBS a lot because I like Big Bang Theory. And CNN's always popping up, and it's like very sensationalist little sound bites of these things. And it's not just CNN, it's Fox, it's MSNBC, it's they're all doing it, right? And you literally have like a feeling you feel when you see these things. Either you're like, yeah, or you're like, oh, you know. I don't know if any of those sounds make sense to you, but that's the whole point behind them. Sensationalism is creating an emotional response to these things. So be mindful. The second you have an urge to click on the thing, to really, oh, what's that all about? That's how they gotcha, right? They're using sensationalism, whether it's the picture of a president or ex-president or pictures of, you know, this or that. Like their intention is to get you to click it, right? That's suggestion, okay? And a lot of times they do suggestion with a picture, even though the picture is not totally related to the article, right? That's how they get you. Okay, when you think about news segments, if ever you watch them, especially like, again, you know, CNN or MSNBC or Fox, whatever you're watching, think about the type of people they have on, how long they have those people on there, and what kind of questions they're asking, right? Are they being more fair to one than the other, right? Or are they, you know, more time for one than another? Okay, let's be honest, of course, they're going to be manipulative. It doesn't matter what side, they all do that. They all have an agenda, and it's all about sensationalism to get you to do the clicks and the watching and the reacting and the reposting and all that stuff. So just keep that in mind. Politicians also know this too. They recognize that, you know, they have a certain moment of time on a certain station that they know maybe they might be the quote unquote enemy or whatever in being on that particular station. So they'll dress a certain way, they'll act a certain way, they'll have a certain reaction, right? They kind of know too. Anyway, so just think about things like that again, how someone might prepare for that sort of thing. Anyway, sound bites. Sound bites are tasty, positive, or negative nuggets that are pulled out of a larger speech into something smaller. A sound bite, just a little tiny bite that we put in there. Oftentimes, people use sound bites to create a positive or a negative reaction from people. Unfortunately, many times these sound bites are pulled out of context. Happens an awful lot. And then there's all we're reading is this little tiny, or seeing this little tiny soundbite and creating a certain idea in our heads about this person. It could be, I mean, it could be politician, it could be like, Billie Eilish recently had a conversation where she was saying too many people were, selling the same album in different colors, right? It's like, it's not sustainable. It's not really good for the environment. And then people called her out on it. They're like, yes, but you pulled that thing out of context and not recognized the whole thing that I was trying to say. And so now she's getting a lot of backlash. Okay, so just think about that. Again, sound bites. I think Lizzo had a few. She's been struggling because it's the same thing. They pull something out of context and then people have a feeling about it. They react to it. And then unfortunately, when you're famous, you're just under the microscope, whether you're a politician, whether, you're a reality star, whatever it is, it's a tough world out there. So sound bites really get you. Oftentimes, I say oftentimes, in my day, George H. Bush, the Bush senior, he had this one speech called 1,000 Points of Light. And that was pulled out of context, and a lot of people reference it for certain things. But again, it's used to create an impression of Bush Senior and Bush Junior and Clinton and all these presidents, right? And Biden and Trump and all these things are pulled out of context to give you a feel for whoever's taking the soundbite, they think you should see them as, okay? Reality TV does this so much. I had a friend who was on a reality TV show back in the day when I lived in LA. And I remember, unfortunately, actually I was living in Vegas. He was in LA. Long story short, he came up to tell us about this time when he was in this reality show where it's this blind love or something, I think it was what it was called. And they introduced each other, and they, had a reaction of how they saw this other person. And when he first saw, his date, he had a reaction of like, oh, okay. And like, no, you need to have a stronger reaction. And they kept doing it over and over and over again to create his character, which ended up being like a villain, even though he was not like that. That is what they did. And that's why you sign contracts when you go into reality TV, because they're going to turn you into whatever they want you to be. You just got to be okay with it. And you can't sue. Getcha. Okay, framing. Framing is very important because, again, like I talked about the weatherman, you got this weatherman and he's gotten blowing in the wind and he's like, you guys, this hurricane. And then you get people walking behind in t-shirts and shorts going, what's this dude doing? It's all about the framing, right? The framing was, unfortunately, the people were walking behind, but if they hadn't been walking behind, you might have believed that this particular weatherman was absolutely being blown away in this hurricane type of weather. Oftentimes, framing is also used out of context. People will maybe take a picture of, so we got a few. Biden falling down the stairs, right, is going to be one frame. They get that picture of him, or Trump's, standing there and his hair is flowing in the wind, right? We pull these, again, somewhat, this framing out of context, put it out there, and, that's how we're judging these people for, it's not even about who they are, it's about this one moment in time, but because of the image creates a type of either sensationalism or a suggestion, right? How framing can create that within our minds. People do it all the time. Also, people can do it as a power play. When you have people standing in a line, who's up front a little bit more. They do that often in, films. Always look at when you see like a movie poster. We're going to say a movie poster. Look at how it'll be at an angle. I'm trying to think of how that'll be. It'll be at an angle, right? And you have the person up front, they're bigger, than the other people as they go back. And look who they're putting in behind that character. Is it actually the main character? Is there something more? Like, notice how that kind of framing matters, okay? So anyway, that's just something you want to think of. Again, framing where you place the subjects in front of, I think Trump he was trying to be in front of, forgive me, I can't remember the hotel. It was like a Hilton, or not a Hilton. It wouldn't have been a Hilton. Can't remember what hotel he was supposed to be in front of, but instead they ended up putting him in front of like a sex store or something. I can't remember. That's all sensationalism. I try not to pay attention, but people made a big stink about it because they're like, oh, you're supposed to be in front of this hotel and look at where you're at now. And they made this big, huge thing. And it's like pulling everything out of context to make, a certain feel. So anyway, that's just how we do it. And it's not that I feel one way towards one president or another. It's just the act of how we create these feelings, the sensationalism based on framing, right? How are we standing in front of this pet store to save the pets, right? You know, did they ever go in the pet store and save the pet? I don't really know, right? It's all about how we're creating this idea we want you to see based on where we set that camera, okay? If you take a look also in the, what do you call it? The notes, I'm gonna have images too to kind of show you what framing looks like. One that I love very, very much is Wes Anderson. His framing is my absolute favorite. Some people are probably, you know, over it. I still love it. It's a great aesthetic, in my personal opinion, just because, you know, I like it. Again, framing also depends on how you have the camera, those kind of angles, okay? Just these little sort of things to understand why does it matter that we do it? Because each single one of them creates a certain feeling that you have towards a person, place, or thing, which gives a suggestion, okay? We talked about spin before, where we use, we change public opinion after an event based on certain things. So you could say a spin would be somebody has, how would it say it? So someone has an affair, right? And the spin on it, you'd have, how would you say? You'd use the event in some way to either have a positive or negative spin on how people feel about this person. You know, they can make it, I mean, God, I'm aging myself. I talk about Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, and you know, when that happened, they put a big spin on it and, you know, really tried to make it seem more, yeah, less negative. I don't think you can make it positive, but as less negative as they could, and how Hillary was right by his side the whole time, that sort of thing. So that's how you kind of try and do a spin on that. Spin can also be done with headlines, right? That's a very, very, you know, common way to make a spin on something. That's actually called the lead. So the lead is going to be that introductory sentence to a news story that it's meant to give the reader the essence or the general meaning of the story. That that very first sentence to kind of tell you, all right, this is what it's about. It's just a sentence, first one. All right, so you have your headline. Usually it could be a, you know, again, a little bit of a spin. You got that headline. Then that lead sentence is the thing that leads you into what you think or what the article is supposed to be about. Okay, it can be done when we talk about spin. You can also press secretaries are the big spin doctors, right? They are the ones who stand in front and have to explain all the things. And oftentimes you'll see with presidents, especially when it gets very tumultuous, you'll have press secretaries up there sweating and be like, well, what he meant to say was this, and what he meant to do was this. And that's what they do. They do spin to try and, you know, save the president or whoever it is they're trying to talk about, or the situation, right? That's the spin. Sometimes, again, when we talk about spin, when we talk about staged events, the adulterer is standing there in public with the wife by their side. Or it can be done with a photo composition where two people shaking hands and smiling, right? That's good. All right, so that's what we do when we do spin. Take a look also at the images on how they are using headlines to kind of show you a spin, or, you know, that lead kind of into what you think the, you know, article is going to be about. People's always the worst, or like In Touch. I used to like get really like, oh, what happened to Brad and Jennifer Aniston? And I'd look at it and the article did not at all talk about what the lead sounded like it was going to. Anyway, also take a look at those images, and you're going to see framing. You've got, you know, Obama with a very angry face screaming with the, you know, headline, appeals court rules individual mandate in Obamacare unconstitutional, right? So they're the picture's out of context for that, but it's to give you a certain feel. Sensationalism, okay? Anyway, take a look at that. It's going to give you all that information. Really quick, we'll talk about the fairness doctrine. The idea behind this was that they were trying to get broadcasters to follow an equal airtime for both sides of an issue. The idea was to give everyone equal time. Like they were trying to find some way in which it wasn't going to be wildly biased. Well, that didn't last long. The question is this a fair move? Was it something that you feel is, oh, that's what it should have done, right? Is news reporting fair and unbiased? No. Unfortunately, no. There's very few places that are. I mean, you might say BBC might do really good, you know, as best they can on American politics because they're so far away. They don't have as much money or things invested in it, so it might be less, you know, biased. New York Times tries their best. It's hard, you know, like all things. They still need to make money. Who knows how much sensationalism they have. They still cover the important topics, but unfortunately they do get pushed down to the bottom. Anyway, so the question is, if we're asking about, broadcasters giving equal time to, so keep in mind, this is in 1987, where they didn't have 24-hour news. Nowadays, it's like news all day, every day. I don't know how people handle that. My parents have like, I don't know, one of the news stations, one of each, right, up all the time. And I'm like, how do you stomach that? It's too much. Anyway, so the question is it fair? Is this a fair and just move to have broadcasters giving equal airtime to both sides of an issue, or is it still manipulation taking place either way? Right? There's always going to be manipulation. Someone's always going to find a way to push their agenda in some way. So say they have equal time, but there's going to be loopholes, right? Harder questions for this particular politician you don't like, or more, gentle questions this way, like maybe certain suggestive, music or actions or whatever to either one, right? While they have equal time, there's always the loophole to, have still an agenda somewhere. So when the policy was in place, the argument was that with this policy in place, the public relies instead on the judgment of the broadcast journalist and its own reasoning ability to sort one-sided or distorted coverage of an issue. So the fear was that the broadcast company was having more power over suggestive, they're having more power either way, even though they're trying to make it equal. The assumption is that the public will be manipulated. Of course we're manipulated. That's how we, we are going to be manipulated. We're human beings. We have feelings. And, especially if someone hits just the right topic, whether it's, an issue or a value that you have, of course. So, a false sense of security and trust in media. This is a problem we have now. We trust so much of the media, and we also distrust the media. And of course, we distrust the media that doesn't say what we want to hear, or we trust too much of the media that says what we want to hear. Does that make sense? Doesn't matter what side you're on. You're going to have more trust on the thing that you go, oh, you're saying what I want to hear, versus you're saying what I don't want to hear. Okay, so I don't know. It's welcome to the world. All right, we just have to be more mindful of stuff. In other words, can we really trust ourselves and others to see through the manipulation? Unfortunately, no. A lot of us, again, we don't see through the manipulation because someone's saying the thing we want to hear. And we're more easily manipulated when we feel that they're saying the thing that we want them to say. Okay? It's just we're being manipulated based on knowing that, they'll know how you will react to what they say. Okay? If you get enough following, you can really kind of manipulate people to do and feel the way they want you to. Okay? All right. Do we need a fairness doctrine? Do we need something like this in 1987? Do we need it now? I don't know. It's tough. Like, at what point do we be like, hey, you're messing with the minds of the people? Like, at what point do we do something different? I don't know. It's very complicated. All right. So the question might be, does media create news or reflect news? Unfortunately, I feel, I'll say that the media creates news more than reflects news. I see that very often, even that recently a bridge had crumbled into a river. I'm losing my brain on where this is. Baltimore, I believe it's in Baltimore. Thank you. So in Baltimore, a very big old thing crashed into it and it all fell down. And so most people would call that a tragedy. Well, news was turning it into the sensationalist thing, and rather than recognizing it for what it truly was, an accident and just terrible. If you saw the workers that fell in, like, we need to kind of maybe have some space for recognizing when terrible things happen, and instead it turns into something sensationalist and manipulative and blaming, one president or another, right? Like, unfortunately, that's what happens with the news. I don't know. They get us in and they get the monies, and that's why they keep doing what they do. All right. So just keep that in mind as you move forward, as you're listening to news segments. How are you being manipulated? All right. How are you letting yourself be manipulated? Okay. Fuzzy words, real quick. Fuzzy words are, they're like weasel words that create an appealing claim or impression, but without actually defining a concrete meaning for the word or phrases. Vague declarations. They do this often again in advertising. You've got a friend in the diamond business. What does that mean? It's very fuzzy. You have a friend in the diamond business? What do you mean by friend? Okay, or we'll leave the light on for you. Well, of course, it's your business. We shut the lights off, people aren't coming in, okay? Or the terms like crisp, full-bodied, you're worth it, okay? Promising nothing, but it sounds appealing. There's no real promise in any of these things, okay? Keep that in mind. Product placement. Got to tell you real quick, as fast as I can on this one. Product placement is not advertising, in the sense that you do not have a product. When I say product placement, it's not the product that's in the advertisement. Okay, I know that sounds... Product placement is not, if you're looking at a commercial and you see a toothpaste commercial and there's toothpaste in this commercial, that's not product placement. That's an advertisement. Totally, totally, totally different. Product placement is when you're watching a movie or a TV show. I say movie, or a TV show where the product is placed within the actual movie or in the TV show, not the commercials in between or before. Product placement is not a commercial where it's showing the product. It is where you put the Coke can in the hand of Ross from Friends. He's like drinking Coke and it literally says Coke on the side of the can. That's product placement. All right, and advertisement are the things in between the actual show. But when you're watching a TV show or a movie and you see something like, Toasties cereal behind them, the Toasties cereal behind them, that's product placement. You can see it very clearly. It's very obviously there. It's in the TV show or the movie. Okay, that's what I need you to pay attention to. All right, it's a practice of integrating or embedding products in films, television programs, and other medias to reach consumers. I think it's the other media part that confuses people. So just think of it as movies and TV shows only, okay? Not advertisements, but in TV shows and movies, when you see a product that's sitting very obviously on the table or in someone's hand or on their shirt or whatever that is product placement. Oftentimes you will see a product that has a very weird name, but it looks very similar to a product. Like it'll look like a can of Coke, but it says cola on it. That's not product placement, because what they're doing is they're not selling the actual Coke. They're just giving you the illusion of what it is. So there's a difference. So I hope you kind of pay attention to that. So if they're giving you actual, like an example for if there's cereal in the background and the cereal is like Frosted Flakes and you can very clearly see Frosted Flakes, that's product placement. Examples, if you want to take a look at the images that I have, there's like say you open up the fridge and there's Minute Maid orange juice. That's product placement. If it's any other name, or if it's got tape on it, or if it's not the actual brand name, that's not product placement. It's only product placement when it's the actual brand of the item. So like again, Minute Maid, things that are very obviously set out so you can see it, like Pepsi in the movie Big with Tom Hanks. He had an actual Pepsi machine. The idea there was a product placement. Why was it Pepsi and not Coke, right? Who was funding it? When you think of, what's that one where he was a FedEx worker and he gets in a plane crash on an island, whatever. FedEx was the product placement on that one. Castaway. Thank you. Castaway. Okay. Again, there's another episode. You got Friends where Ross is holding an actual Coke. You can actually see Coca-Cola on there. If you look really close, I almost want to see whether or not it's bleeped out, but it looks like a Coke can. If you can see it really well and it's very obvious, that's usually product placement. Pepsi and Nike for Back to the Future 2. Back to the Future 1, they mentioned Calvin Klein. They didn't show it, but they mentioned it. Could that have been a product placement? It's questionable. Again, Nike was very big in Back to the Future. All right, so one of the very last ones is the Gestalt principle. Now, the Gestalt principle, some students kind of get this one a little bit confused too. Take a look on page 352 for that one. It's going to give you a little bit more, but the idea here is it's a principle that states that our minds strive towards congruence and the completion of information, right? Da 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 da. When we hear that, right, that's the Gestalt principle. We know it's McDonald's just by hearing that. Okay, it's this thing that our brain wants to complete the thing. We want to answer the question, right? We want congruence throughout. So oftentimes, if a message strikes us as incomplete, we're going to fill in the missing details ourselves. So this is why very bizarro, unique commercials stick out to us. It's the Gestalt principle. It doesn't make sense, and our brain wants to make sense of it, so it sticks with us. The Old Spice commercials are ones that do that. So you'll notice, you're like, why was that commercial so weird? That's what they're doing. It's the Gestalt principle. They're trying to make you question things to make sense of something, and then they're in that. It gives you this like remembering. You remember it. So questions or slogans that, because there's two parts of it. Questions or slogans that a consumer is taught to answer. Da 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 da. That right there, that jingle, that sound, you know that's McDonald's. That's how they do it. You're in good hands with Allstate, right? These slogans, these things, like they do this. I know, let's see what some other, I know Geico, all these little ones, they give you these things that it helps you to remember. Okay, so sometimes they'll do things where they are begging the question, right? Where they're asking a question asked of us. Okay, and I'll give you some examples on here. Let me see, we're in 352. Sorry for that. Let's see here. Let's do Winston tastes good like a cigarette should. Winston tastes good like a cigarette should. Okay, they don't do advertisements for cigarettes anymore. That's a whole other thing. We talked about that, and thank you for smoking. The ethics behind that. Let's see here. Aren't you hungry for burgers, King Burgers now? Why spend money on a gym when you can do our great workouts at home? Doesn't your child deserve the gift of love? Right? They're kind of forcing you to, questions being begged for answers. Okay. So take a look on 352 and 353 for more of that. They give you all kinds of good stuff on here. I'm trying to see if there's a good one. Whatever. Okay, so number 2, they use images that don't make sense. Again, when we talk about the Old Spice commercials, that does that very often. Your brain goes, what is going on? Or if it's new, if it stands out to you, creates an emotional reaction, you're just like, oh, this makes me think a thing. That's how it gets stuck with you. Again, Old Spice commercials are my favorite. So images that don't make sense. Okay, that's kind of a big one. All right, so again, take a look at those. I don't have to give you the whole readings of the book because you can read it too. And those are going to give you more examples. Again, the idea is something that makes us want to fill in the holes of the thing in front of us. We're like, what is happening? What's going on over here? Okay. All right. And last but not least, we have subliminal subliminal persuasion. Okay. And it's information meant to affect people on an unconscious level. Let's be honest, science doesn't really have proof for this, but it's something, right? There is something unconscious. I don't know if you could say sounds or music or any of the things above that we've just talked about, if that's a part of it. Media uses subliminal persuasion, fuzzy words, the Gestalt principle. Eye tracking and neuro marketing aren't really terms we're going to be using, but just little things to manipulate you either as voters or consumers and things. The question is, are you resigned to this? I don't know. I don't really know if you could quantify it or really truly say it. I would say subliminal persuasion might really not be a real thing. I don't know. So it's just a vocabulary word. You don't have to use it. I just put it in there so that way you recognize that there is times in which it might be being used, but I don't really know how, aside from all the things above, that creates this maybe subliminal persuasion based on, sights, sounds, and all those things. So anyway, if anything, subliminal persuasion would be talking about all the things above and how they relate. That's about it. So again, tried my best to go as fast as I possibly could. I know you have the two together this week. So anyway, message me if you have questions. Great job.